Yeah, Jay, I mean, all right.
What's up,
Here
man?
we go. What up, man?
I was just telling my
Alrighty, guys.
followers about you. So
Dope, dope.
I said he hates all of us, but he's a really awesome dude.
So I said about him. He's a Trump supporter. Wants to have a good discussion. We're just gonna have a good chat. Try and find good areas of commonality. Maybe talk about the things we disagree on. But I'm gonna ask that people keep it fairly respectful. You know, obviously we can have some fun, everybody in the comments, but don't go too far. Let's try and actually have a discussion here. So, anything you want to kind of
She said
start out with, my
She
man?
said she likes your beard. One of my people.
Appreciate that. Put a lot of effort into it. You know what I'm saying?
So what's up, man?
All right, so I think something we can probably talk about. A big thing is probably criminal justice reform. I think it's the hot topic of the day. Police, gun control, Second Amendment, systemic racism, maybe some of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm down for all that.
Dope.
What do you want to start at?
So let's see. And then actually, too, let's see this. If anyone pops in the comments, I'll try and kind of pay attention to some of the comments. If there's something good, maybe that we can address, I'll try and go there. If I miss it, just kind of spam it. I'll try and pay attention to both. Can you see the comments too? Or
I can see mine and you can see yours. I can't see your people.
Okay, dope. All right, so I can see your guys' comments. He can see his comments. We can't see the other comments. So if you feel like you want to kind of interrupt or you see a comment from your side that you think we should address, just let me know, and I'll do the same. So let's start Second Amendment, maybe. How about that? Since I think that's a hot topic for conservatives. And it's something I'm actually kind of pro 2A. So
you're pro 2A?
I am. That's something I'll probably agree, I think, more with you than I disagree on this topic.
Yeah, so I remember like whenever, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, when I started questioning my beliefs and values and stuff, I kind of got a little bit on the fence about it as far as like, should we allow any firearm and as many firearms as people deem necessary and as many rounds? And my take on that is yes. I mean, if they come out with a gun that shoots, you know, I don't know.
You're in the let me have a tank camp. Let me get my tank camp.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, at some point you got to put a limit on it, maybe. But if you do that at all, then you're interfering with our rights. So I say no.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, especially because the police and the government and the military, that's just us in the end, right? We occupy those positions. Those are citizens who take those roles, right? And I mean, I think the Second Amendment is pretty clear in purpose, right? We know what they feared, right? What they feared, both the tyrannical government and a tyrannical, the masses, right? So I think, to me, the gun control issue, I think we kind of go a little wild on it. I think people want some easy Band-Aids. I've always told, in my videos, I've always said we need to focus on, I think, like domestic abusers, for example.
Yeah.
Anyone who's committed assault in their past, oftentimes they're kind of more prone to gun violence. The majority of gun violence or gun deaths is suicide. So obviously better mental health support.
Well, if you really look at the statistics too, like, I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
Hey, go ahead, bro.
It's like the amount of shootings per year versus the amount of defensive uses of a firearm, it's not even close. I mean, you have they estimate 1 million to 3 million defensive uses of firearms. So if you have 3 children in your car and you use your firearm to defend yourself, you just save 4 lives. So how many, what's the difference in ratio between saving lives and a few shootings a year? People think they're right. They think that we're heartless and we don't care about stuff like that, but we do. We just don't want you to. We don't believe that taking our guns is going to stop school shootings. We believe that there's other measures you can take.
100%. With school, and that's actually something I think is important. I think the issue of gun violence in general is probably different than the issue of mass shootings specifically. Obviously, they both kind of fall under the umbrella of guns in general, right? But I think they're kind of different problems, at least is what I would say. But to your point, oftentimes, like, I think everyone's kind of bitched about the police to some degree, right? It's just the way they kind of bitch about them is different.
Yeah.
And some a little more extreme, right? But the reality is, dude, like, I don't know about you, but like, I'm not calling the cops if shit goes down. Not because like I have a problem with the cops. I just don't got time. Like shit's going down. They're not going to get there in time. Like, I'm going to trust myself for my own defense. And I think most Americans kind of feel that way. Not everyone's got easy access to like 911 of the cops right there, right? Like there's different demographics, different like rural areas, right? Urban areas. So.
Well, I'm from Oklahoma, so.
Oklahoma?
Yeah, so we don't It's ingrained in me that we don't do that. If
I mean,
we got to
plus we're
protect
one of the few
ourselves, people
countries.
are gone out.
Yeah,
I'm
plus
not
we
calling
want
the
our
cops.
freedom, man.
I don't trust
Not
the
every
police,
country.
to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, not every country like won their freedom like we did with their guns. Like it's just like it's just a little different when it comes to our culture, man. I'm not. It's not a. I'm not saying it's a positive thing because obviously we have an issue. The mass shootings are off the charts right now. If you look at gun violence through the decades, the mass shootings are off the charts. We got to do something about that. But I think we got like media, dude. Media coverage. Media glorifies the shooter. I think that's a problem.
Oh yeah, music too.
You think music? I don't know
Music
if I talk about music myself, but I'll hear you out. Where are you going with that one?
Oh no, I listen to hip hop and all that shit. I'm just saying that I think that we have a culture problem in America, more so than a gun problem or a racism problem. I think it's a culture problem.
How so? I'm yours. Dive into that for me.
It's just the culture of this country is with the music, the movies, the culture is sort of gang banging and violence and drugs and disrespecting women. And like when I was a kid, I don't know how old you are, but that's when all that stuff was really getting popular, like rap and GTA and all that. And everybody our age would kind of dive into that culture. And it's like, I think it glorifies the wrong things, basically. So I think that's a big problem.
I would ask this question because, like, I would agree that some of the, and I think so. For example, some of my comments aren't really happy with what you just said right there, right? Because they think
Hey, what?
So first, I'm just gonna give you a little feedback and then give my response. For example, some of the comments aren't happy because like, oh, like those comments can kind of seem like racist, right? Talking about like the music, but it's like, if we're gonna be fair, some of the lyrics, and this goes across genres, right?
I love rap, dude.
Yeah,
that's my
this is where
genre.
I think people kind of go crazy. It's like, dude, you can listen to some, and it kind of depends, right? But you can find rock music, certain metal, even a few country songs, right? Some rap where they're just not sending a very good message, right? I don't think this is actually like specific to any group of people or any type of music. It's just some people use their genre a little better than others, right? But what I would argue is I don't think this is anything new or specific to like that culture. I think that's America and always has been America. I think if you look at the founding of this country, right, women weren't allowed to vote, haven't been allowed to vote until about 100 years ago. As much as I respect the Constitution because of some of the freedoms that are kind of written in there and the ideal, slavery is written into it, for example. The issue is I think a lot of the violence of America, I mean, capitalism, some people could argue, is kind of inherently violent because capitalism depends upon labor, right, and productive power. But what got that start, if not free labor in the form of slavery, which is a really violent endeavor, right? So I think violence is kind of the American thing to some degree.
Yeah.
It's like I can't blame, like, I mean, and so here's the thing: we if we look at the process of slavery, right? We strip them of their culture, of their identity, of their history, of their language, of their people, of their families, and then we taught we taught them how America looks, right? Like they built this country on their backs, got none of that, and then after that ended, there's no reparations, nothing done to help them. In fact, Jim Crow kind of popped up, right? And then it's just like, to me, it's like I don't like the culture conversation because I'm not so big on our culture, you know, like.
Well, you've seen
but I guess that's what you're saying though. Is the culture as a whole is not good. We agree. We probably just disagree on why, maybe. So
yeah. I wouldn't say we disagree, honestly. I think we just disagree on what needs to be done about it because I agree with everything you just said. I'm not going to bite my tongue because we live in a world right now where you can't say what's on your mind because if you do, it's going to be like that comment I made about rap and somebody said that sounded racist. It's not racist at all. It's a culture issue, not a skin color issue. There are plenty of rappers that are white, plenty of them, and they talk about the same shit. And Mexican rappers, it's not a color thing. I love hip hop, but I listen to like Jordan Lucas, and I mean his stuff's it's not Christian by any means, but it's not as bad as some of that dumb shit like the mumble rapping, like Gucci Gang, all that shit. That's so bad for our country, bro. I'm telling you. But when you're talking about Jim Crow and all this stuff, I'll be the first to admit, probably a lot of right wingers don't think like I do. Like I've sent you the screenshot of the stuff I posted last summer on Facebook just to show you kind of where my head was at back then.
Yeah.
And so when that happened to George Floyd, you know, I completely got pissed off. I think like a lot of people did. And it made me really look at what's going on in this country right now with the race stuff and everything. And then I don't want to say I bought into a false ideology, but I kind of started to believe something that I don't believe is true now.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I don't is not because I'm white privileged and I've never believed it. No, I was buying into this belief that everyone has right now. And then black conservatives said, wake the fuck up. It's not true. So it's actually black people who brought me to where I'm at now, sort of.
So that's something, and I'm gonna tread a little delicately here because, like, I give the caveat, like, I'm just a white dude, like, given his perspective, you know, I don't, if I tread on someone's toes, I do apologize. I'm still gonna speak my mind, right? Like, that's how we got, like, to your point, we got to have conversations. You can't be afraid to be honest with someone. So how could you ever understand or move forward, right? So my thing is, like, let's just take a Candace Owens for example, right? Because I think that's someone who people look to as a conservative black woman, right? Who kind of is a respectful figure to many. The problem is anyone can be racist, right? Regardless of skin color, and anyone can support structural racism, right? Or institutional racism. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. And so I find if you got someone like Candace Owens, who for whatever reason was able to become successful, right? Oftentimes people who have individual success have a hard time having these conversations, which are really population level conversations. Because when we're talking about systemic racism, we're not really talking about any individual person. We're talking about the system and demographics and outcomes at the population level, right? Because, for example, we know that per capita, black men are being arrested more, right? They're getting charged longer, things like that, right? And is that really because of skin color?
How much more, though?
And so I was just going to try and pull up. If we'd have been doing this a little more formally, I'd have the numbers. But
I remember
talk.
When George
talk
Floyd,
for a bit. I'll look it up for a second.
when George Floyd died, I watched the 13th, that show on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And that show kind of, I've been arrested before. I've been to jail. I've been to prison, and then I got out and I went through this program where I got my felony dismissed. So I'm not a felon, but I've been through all that. And I kind of bought into that, what you're talking about, because like I said, I watched that documentary, but then I really started looking at the numbers right now. Now, I believe what you're saying in the 90s, the 80s, the 90s, maybe even in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very clear that black people were being arrested disproportionately and that they were given longer sentences. But I don't see it now. I don't see it now at all. If you look
Give me a quick second.
Each individual case is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem I think that we have in this country, is that people try to paint something with the same brush they painted another situation with. Every situation is different. So this person may have racist intentions with his actions while this person doesn't. And you can't put everybody in the same category. Just because someone's black and there's a white cop that kills him, it doesn't mean racism, is what I'm saying. It may.
That's a good, okay, so you actually have a fair point there. So I think this is what kind of gets lost, is there's the nuance of the conversation. And Carnage, good point, stopping first. There's the nuance of that, right? So I think what people miss, for example, let's just talk Adam Toledo specifically. We'll probably dive into this one a little more because I think it's a good talking point. Sadly, it's a tragic talking point, but there's a lot at play there, and there's a lot you can analyze. The problem is, totally lost my train of thought there. But here, give me a quick second before we dive into that. I want to actually give you the numbers here. Okay. This is from like the United States Sentencing Commission, and actually, this is the U.S. government did a number on this. I'm just going to read this out real quick. These are the key findings, and they dive into this a lot more. But number one, because you just talked about context, right? And like we do have to account for context and like the difference in things, right? And not every situation is the same, right? But this does kind of account for that. So number one, black male offenders continue to receive longer sentences than similarly situated white male offenders. So black male offenders receive sentences on average 19.1% longer than similarly situated white males. So that means if you account for everything being the same and just skin color is the only difference, all right, the sentence is about 19% longer for black men. Number two, there's going to be a surprising little plot twist at the end here that everyone should take to heart too, because it impacts everybody. Long story. Non-government sponsored departures and variances appear to contribute significantly to the difference in sentence lengths between black males and white males. So that means there's like differences in like access to lawyers, maybe representation, things like that.
Oh yeah.
So violence in an offender's criminal history does not appear to account for any of the demographic differences in sentencing. So that's saying that like their past, like crime logs, like and things like that, might not actually play a difference in sentencing when it comes to skin color. And here's the thing: female offenders of all races receive shorter sentences than white male offenders. So there's like levels to the systemic inequality, right? So like everyone's impacted by this, but men way more so than women, all men, and then within men, minorities way more so than white men. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. There's one point that you made that I agree with. Did you know that 95% of all incarcerated inmates right now are on a plea agreement?
Yes.
Which means either they decided, you know what, I'm going to take a deal because I don't want to fight this, or I can't afford an attorney, so just give me whatever you want to give me.
Which means the system's fundamentally broken on multiple levels.
Yeah. And I'll be the first to agree with that. My major thing, what I get upset about is when people scream racism at every single turn. Because number one, what I think they're doing wrong is you're taking away from the actual racist situations. When you say, oh, that's racist, that cop was racist, and that cop was racist, and that cop was racist, people are like, it's the boy who cried wolf. People are getting tired of it. If you actually pinpoint the ones that are racist, that you can prove are racist situations, I think you would get a lot further.
So to that point, so like, let's just take like a specific shooting. I think what people don't understand is it's not always that like the cop had in mind like, oh, I wanted to kill a black person because I'm racist and hate black people. I think they're less than. But oftentimes the way they react to a situation, because these are often like kind of quick, almost like you don't have time to sit there and be like deeply analytical, right? You're kind of almost like operating on a subconscious level, right? Quick assumptions, quick generalizations. You're being efficient as possible with your processes, right, mentally. And so the problem is, oftentimes stereotypes you might hold might dictate your range of outcomes towards this end rather than that end. So it's not like he's consciously thinking black people are less than, but the totality of his beliefs, where he might hold some unconscious bias, things like that, might cause him to react more in fear from a black person doing this than a white person doing this, right? Which might cause the gun to get fired as opposed to being held right there.
Let me
ask
you this,
little slight things.
Let me ask you this. Think about this honestly. So that's what I'm getting to when I say a culture problem, not a skin color problem. If that same cop is in Beverly Hills and she pulls over a black man in a suit, do you think that she's going to react the same way? Will there be any fear? Will there be any bias?
I'd say still some, but not quite as much, probably, given like where you're at, given some of the appearance and things like that. I think
That's
like I think I'd say it's the totality of it.
I think that if she was to pull over a white man that looked like me with all my tattoos and stuff, and I was dressed like a gangbanger, then I think she would probably have the same exact bias that she had towards the African American.
I'd agree there'd be some bias there for sure, 100%, no doubt about that.
I've received bias many times, and maybe that's why I have an issue believing it, because I don't fit the stereotypical white male, clean cut, wearing a polo shirt. You know what I mean?
I get it, because it's my mom's side of the family is kind of like you call hillbilly, redneck kind of, and it's the same thing. Some got got some records and whatnot, and like, so for them, because they've seen how the system can be firsthand, it's hard to be like, because like you've seen the system, so like that's what I think that's the problem with like the privilege conversation, right? Because there's a lot of people regardless of skin color who've been fucked by the system, right? Be it the criminal justice system, be it banks, be it somewhere in like the loan industry, maybe like medical, the medical industry, something like that. So I think that's like better than saying like just talking about systemic racism. We have to talk about the fact that the system is fundamentally broken for everybody, man. It just does impact some people worse. But like I think that's where the
I was in that 95%.
Yeah,
I was one of the 95%. I didn't have a lawyer. I had a court-appointed attorney, and I literally was charged and convicted of a crime that I didn't even commit. Basically, I was staying with my buddy. He told me, you need to leave. This was like 6-7 years ago, and I left. Well, I left some of my stuff there, and I went back the next day to get it, and he called the police on me, filed charges on me for going in his house when he wasn't home, and that's the reason why I got a burglary charge. So I agree with what you're saying. And that's why I think since I've lived that, and I've been pulled over and treated like I was scum of the earth by police. You know what I mean? So I think that's maybe why I have a problem believing all this, because I've been in that situation and I'm white.
I think that's fair. That's 100%. That's a good conversation to be had, because what that would refer to is anecdotal evidence, right? So because like my personal experience is this way, it's hard for me to like, right? Which is totally fair, because like when you look at, so what is data if not the accumulation of personal experience, right? So like that's totally fair, but again, that's kind of why you got to again look at these things from a population level, right? So it's like, and that's why it's not about the individual, because in the end of the day, everyone has to play the hand they're dealt, right? No matter what the system is, no matter what the government looks like, no matter what system you live in, you still got to do the best you can with what you're given, right, day to day.
Yeah.
So like,
I think it's all anecdotal.
Yeah, exactly.
All anecdotal.
But I think that's why I know like people have a hard time with the privilege conversations, like. But it's not that like being white necessarily gives you some card that you just pull out and hey, I'm going to use this today. But being white typically, not always, but typically provides you cover for some of the bullshit that minorities have to deal with. Typically.
You know,
now,
the one part about white privilege that I will agree on, and I think this is common sense, is that let's say you were black, right? And I'm from a small town in Oklahoma, and you were my neighbor. My dad was a plumber. If your dad in the 80s would have been a plumber in a small town in Oklahoma, I don't think he could have been successful. And so without him being successful, the way my dad now has all kinds of money and has built a life for himself and was able to raise me with money. Not very much, but more than maybe what a black man's dad was.
It could have been, yeah.
And that's where I agree that white privilege is real to that extent, that things that have happened in our families and our parents and our grandparents' lifetimes have an effect on today. But that's where I stop with white privilege. I don't believe that as of 2021, other than the financial benefits that somebody could receive more than the other person in their parents' or grandparents' lifetime, I think that now, let's say 2024 or 2040, I don't think any of these issues are even going to be relevant anymore. You see what I mean?
I mean, you bring an interesting point. I mean, they're going to become less and less relevant just because the demographics are changing pretty hard. I mean, by 2050, whites will probably be a minority in America.
Yeah, I just don't see it being. What reason does somebody have to claim white privilege in, let's say, 2045?
I mean, I can't really hypothetically that because, like, if things continue to change as they look like they might change, and like if you look at like human history, right, we've been around for like thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, right? So much of that change has occurred just in the last 200 years, right? So kind of snowball effect. The shit's gonna just move more like faster and faster and faster. So like we're either gonna fall off a cliff hella fast, or we're gonna just kind of keep progressing, right? So by 2045, I mean, dude, I have no idea what the world's gonna look like because look at how much different it looks from just 2000 to 2020, right?
Yeah.
And it's gonna look even more different. There's gonna be even more change in the next 25 years. But I think again, the problem with today is we can look to education, so we can look to like local funding, things like that. We know how kind of education works as it relates to like local taxes, right? And we know with white flight, redlining, right? You just talked about how your dad being a plumber and skin might have kind of played an impact, right, in the 80s.
I don't know about everywhere else, but I know in Oklahoma, being a black man in the 70s or 80s and trying to have a business where you have to go to people's homes, like old white ladies and stuff, I would see that being a problem, 100%. You know what I mean? At least where I'm from.
See, like that's kind of the thing, right? So, like, I mean, I guess that's why it's like, I guess I'm kind of a slight bit kind of perplexed. I'm not gonna lie, because I was expecting more pushback on some of this shit.
From me?
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, I mean, most conservatives, for example, they're just not going to accept the concept of white privilege to any degree. I mean, I'll concede that privilege is idea, like privilege as a whole needs to be talked about more because there's more than just white privilege in this world. There's height privilege. I mean, like, and I'm not reducing I'm not reducing any of it, but like male privilege. I mean, like how tall you are, right? How good looking you are, like all this shit kind of matters, right? So, I don't know. Like, I think I think privilege.
The number one privilege in this country right now, by far, the number one privilege is having a dad in your home.
So I could be wrong about this, but I've seen a lot of that. Like when it comes to like outcomes for children, it's not specifically having your dad there. It's just having a lot of like having enough father figures in the community, like good role models in the community.
Whether it's a stepdad or a father, there's studies, so many studies that prove that. There's I was reading one the other day that a black child raised by a mother and a father in a two-parent home is 94% more likely to be successful than a white child raised by a single mother.
So that's interesting, right? But also then So that
The U.S.
assumes. So
Census
this is why
Bureau. That's from the U.S. Census Bureau.
This is interesting because this gets back to. So I was having a conversation with some people about whether people should. So like we have this idea like humans like meant to be like monogamous. I'm like, dude, I don't know like if humans are like meant to be monogamous or not. Like I think it's just kind of more like it depends upon the society, what that society values, and individual people within that framework. But if we look at like divorce rates, for example, so like that stat assumes that the family didn't divorce, the parents stayed together, right? So a lot of the assumptions we have about two-parent households don't factor in that most two-parent households don't stay together. And what's divorce look like on kids, right?
Well, and that's a good theory for why kids are being so bad today. I mean, you don't have to believe it, but it's a good point.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for the fact that the rate of single-parent households has risen a lot, like dramatically from the 1960s to today. I'm not gonna like attribute that to anything, but that's a thing. So.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna tell you about your comment you made a minute ago when you said you were expecting more pushback, especially because of my videos and stuff I post, my content. People don't think that I have a brain. They don't think that I think for myself. Like the number one comment I get that I can't stand from leftists is when I talk about the vaccine, I get 1,000 fucking comments where people say, if Trump told you to get it, you would. No, the fuck I wouldn't. Like Trump is not my fucking God. He's not my daddy.
I think so let me pause you on that one, but there's actually I believe you. Like I believe you on that. And I know it's not the case for everybody. But let me give you an example on this. Yeah. So if you look at mask use across the spectrum over like from the beginning through summertime, once Trump finally put a mask on months in, you had a over 50% increase in use of masks by Republicans, right? So that's literally monkey see, monkey do. You know what I'm saying? So
and here's the truth, bro. There's sheep on our side and there's sheep on y'all side.
Oh yeah, 100%. So I mean, 100%. That's where I would say like there's a number I like to throw around a lot because I think there's just some numbers that everyone has to know because it really just kind of puts some shit in perspective. 72% of Americans are scientifically literate. All right, that's not just gonna be conservatives. That's gonna go for people on the left too, right? The left has some stupid views when it comes to like GMOs, when it comes to nuclear energy, right? It's like, dude, what's your issue with nuclear energy? Like that shit's stupid in my opinion, right? But
my biggest issue with the left is two genders. That's my biggest issue.
I would say that's a conflation. I think the right conflates sex and gender. I have a hard time with the sex stuff myself. I'm not gonna lie, like I don't fully understand that. Like so, like I'm kind of always learning about that. It's just something I don't really have a hard opinion on because it's just I don't know, and that's where I like totally can see it. I come from like a privileged position within society, like that. You know, I'm a straight white dude, like so I get it. These conversations really impact people way more than it impacts me. So I kind of listen, and I'll give my opinion if people ask on that stuff. But
so about what you were saying a minute ago, dude, I get annoyed when somebody from my side is acting like that too. Like when they act like that Trump's God or something. And I'll be the first person to say it. Like a real conservative, in my opinion, we have had values and principles instilled in us. And we live by our values and principles. We don't waver because, like a lot of people say, Trumpism was born in 2016. But I don't believe I have Trumpism within me. It's conservatism. And my values and principles were already there. Trump just showed up. And Trump's beliefs, a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them aligned with mine. So now that Trump's gone, if Trump doesn't run again, then Trump's in the past. You see what I mean?
I think that's interesting because I was a registered Republican until 2019. A lot of people don't know that. And I grew up conservative. I always had conservative views. I was really conservative for sure until about 2015. I started to kind of lean and started to move. And then once Trump arrived on scene, it like really pushed me away. I was like, because like for me, leadership is way more than just policy. Especially, I mean, just think about a manager at work, like at a most basic level, or a teacher, right? There's both different types of leaders, but they're both leaders. Imagine having a teacher who acted like Donald Trump as a leader. You would never accept that, right? Imagine a manager who acted as Donald Trump. You would rarely accept that. There might be a few instances, right?
Bro.
But rarely would you accept that. And so then it's like, but we accept that as a president. And so to me, it's like I can't even have a conversation about policy because like I just can't. And because like I've been in a position where I'm a leader in certain contexts, right? It's like leadership matters. How you conduct yourself matters because that is then what leadership within the flock looks like, right? Because how you act and how you talk and how you move and how you maneuver is how everyone behind you is going to maneuver, right? And so no one wants to have this conversation. It's like I think a lot of people on the left could be open to talking about conservative values, but not wrapped up like that.
Check this out. So here's my theory on that, because I went through the same thing last summer. I couldn't stand Trump for a little bit. Like, I would see his tweets and the way that he would just talk shit and berate people. And I'm like, dude, you are the president of the United States. Why are you even stooping down to this childish level? And then, so I kind of fought with that back and forth until one day I finally realized, I was like, dude, as long as his policies are making the changes that I believe should be made, then I have to just put up with that shit. But then I had like an epiphany one day, and I could be wrong, but this is my theory. And I believe this. I believe it. And when someone believes something, like, for example, masks, I don't believe masks work. I do not believe they work. So for me not to wear a mask, I do not believe I'm putting anybody in jeopardy. So I'm not an asshole for not wearing one, right? If I don't believe they work. Now, if I believe they work and still chose not to wear one, I would be a dick. Right?
So there's a point. Like I kind of still semi disagree with you, but I see your point though. I do see your point.
So that's what happened with Trump. So I had an epiphany, and it just hit me like, dude, I think in a crazy, weird way, Trump has to be like this. Like, this is what we need, as bad as that sounds, because the left, dude, and you will admit this, I'm sure, whether you agree it was warranted or not, the left came after him like fucking 5-year-old kids, like clawing and scratching and trying to get him impeached, and never had a good word to say. Never gave him an opportunity, just treated him like complete shit from day one.
So here's where I'm going to pause you real quick, because I can understand a lot of that, because some of that I used to say myself, even to some degree. So, for example, when they first were calling Trump a fascist in 2015, 2016, I thought that was too much. I was like, all right, that's hyperbole. Like, come on, man. Like, I thought he was a clown back then, but I thought that was too much.
Somebody just said, after January 6th, do you regret your vote for him? And I just want to tell that person, fuck no. I'm glad I did.
I think so. That's something we have to address too. So there's 3 things we got to address. I think I want to address masks, I want to address vaccines, and I want to address January 6th. I think.
Okay.
So let's start with masks, maybe. Because I do hear your point, right? Because that's actually one of the biggest issues when it comes to the entire climate right now. Is like, if you believe the election was stolen, you should act upon that, and you should never submit to that. So I hear your point. It's like, if you believe something, you should act upon that. If you don't act upon your own belief, there's some contradiction there. So I hear your point. But the problem with masks is sometimes it's more than what we believe, right? We have to have what I would call intellectual humility. Like, we all have shit that we're really knowledgeable on, and there's a fuck ton of shit we don't know, right? And I'm going to guess neither one of us really knows the particulars of, virology, like, comes to like immunology, all that jazz, right? Like the biology of all this stuff. And so when I see people who dedicate their lives to this, really decades of information, hours and hours, like we're talking like thousands of hours of time to like study these things, and they're telling us, and I do understand, like, and remember, 72% of Americans don't understand scientific communication whatsoever, right? So even if they're right, people don't get it, and if they're not getting that information in a healthy way, they're not going to get it for sure. So the issue with masks, for example, is we know masks work. Like, so I guess let me say, what was the first thing with masks that like kind of set you off? You don't like masks? Maybe I can address it better.
Why I don't like them?
Yeah. So what was your first thing, like, why you don't think they work, or like what is it?
Okay. So when all this started, I was wearing a mask. I'd wear one. I'm not one of them guys that are like, oh, 1776, you want me to wear a mask? Fuck you, I'm not wearing one. No, I want to investigate this for myself and learn and figure out, is it beneficial for me to wear one? If I can help save somebody's life by wearing one, I'll wear one. It's just a mask. It's not a big deal. Well, I talked to a couple of doctors. I talked to a scientist that my dad knows from Dallas, Texas. And then I did some research and stuff, and I have come to the conclusion, based on other people who are smarter than me and have a higher level of education, that they don't work. And then when I started seeing all the stupidity in this fucking country, like yesterday at my son's soccer game, he's 3 years old. They're playing soccer and they're running around grabbing each other, playing grab ass, fucking tripping over each other, sitting by each other on the bench, but they can't shake hands after the game. They have to sit all the way 50 feet across from each other and wave at each other. And
let me pause you, because you just brought up a good point. So there's something you got wrong there. I'm going to address that, but there's something you did bring it that's fair. So remember how I said, like, again, it's going to be kind of dickish, but when I said, like, most people just don't understand the science, right? And so oftentimes, because they don't understand it, what it means is they're going to look for information that kind of confirms what they want to believe in.
Confirmation bias.
This goes to the left and the right, right? So people on the left are going to be more inclined to believe something. They're going to find reasons to believe that. People on the right might be more inclined not to believe something. They're going to find reasons not to believe that. The issue is you can always find, even like amongst the experts, you'll always find some experts who push back against masks to some degree or something, right? So you're never going to have 100% pure consensus because nothing life's perfect, nothing life's pure, right? The issue is we have, like, for example, there's a meta-analysis done on masks that has over 172 observational studies in it. And all of these observational studies, in some range, at minimum, very little effect. At maximum, very strong effect, right? And so the reality is there's no studies out there to say that masks have a negative effect. There's some studies out there to say masks have a small effect. And there's a lot of studies out there to say masks have some range of good effect, right?
Okay, I see what you mean. So you're saying it's not going to hurt to wear one. I can agree with that. But there's also studies. It depends on, like you said, everyone has confirmation bias. There's very few people, probably 10% of America, that actually doesn't look for confirmation and doesn't.
100% of people, bro. Everyone does it. Some just some just do a little better sometimes than others.
It's the stupidity for me. Like, you're asking me my opinion. It's the stupidity for me. When I go to a McDonald's and they have to hand me my food on a plastic tray and then take my card with a plastic tray and then pick the card up and swipe it and put it back in the plastic tray and then hand it to me. I don't handle stupidity well. And then also, it's like there's so much misinformation from each side. And when you have a virus that literally kills 1% or less of the people that get it, and that's 1%'s a lot. A lot of people have died. I'm not knocking that. But for someone who's 30 years old like me, I'm in perfect health. I work out every day. If I was going to my grandma's house, I would wear a mask. Personally, I would wear one. There's a difference in choosing to wear one and being forced. That's my issue. You're not going to.
But I think so. That's kind of the fundamental issue right there. I think with Americans, it's like even when we know we need to do something, just because we don't like being like told to do it, for example, right? We're like, oh fuck, like I'm not going to do it. So like I feel you there, like. But the reality is, like, I'm 28. I'm same as you. Like, I'm healthy. Like, I'm an athlete. Like, I'm not personally concerned about this shit. But I got the vaccine and I did what I was supposed to because I believed in it. Because I recognize it's bigger than me. Like, the reality is, the problem in a situation in a war. Let's say like we're on the front lines together. Like it's me and you, and I do some stupid shit, and it gets you hurt. We can directly see that, right? We can see that cause and effect. In a pandemic, you can't see that cause and effect because the enemy's hidden. You can't see the virus. So one of the big things that we didn't understand early on was the rate of asymptomatic carriers, right? So one of the biggest things when someone's sick is most people have common sense, right? Yo, I'm sick. I'm not going to go out because like I can spread it, right? But the problem is early on, a lot of people who were sick didn't realize they were sick. They weren't showing symptoms, right? So if half your population is sick, is out and about, they don't realize they're sick and they're spreading the virus, right? You're going to have a problem. So that was kind of some of the issues with masks early on. Early on, we didn't have enough of the. So there's different types of things, right? You have face coverings, you've got surgical masks, and you've got like the respirator masks, right? Early on, the conversation was more about surgical masks and respirators, right? And they were worried about shortages. And at that point in time, you think that you're going to have people who are sick that are either going to be in hospital-like settings or staying at home, right? So you tell the public, don't worry about masks. We need this for people who are going to be in contact with the sick. But then when you learn about the rate of asymptomatic carriers, you realize everybody's going to be in contact with the sick because people out in public now might be sick as well, right? So that's why the assumptions change. And what people don't understand is science is not a set answer. Science is a process. And
exactly.
So what's happening right now is you have a scientific process that's happening
that's
real
why
fucking
I'm not getting
time.
the vaccine.
Yeah, go ahead. I've been talking a lot.
That's why I'm not getting the vaccine, because it's a process. I'm not getting the vaccine right now.
So you're talking about, you worried about like the mRNA technology?
Well, they rushed it. They rushed it so fast, and I'm not putting something like that into my body until I know how it affects people. I've heard
so
stories.
Are you like generally not big on vaccines, or like just this one specifically?
No, I never get vaccines, but I would get this one if I felt comfortable that it worked. But there hasn't been enough trial and error yet. I've heard stories about people dying. There's people who have died. What's that black guy's name? His grandpa just died. I posted.
So I don't know if anyone that you can trace. I don't know if anyone's actually died specifically due to the vaccine. I would argue that that's probably misinformation. Now,
here's my problem with that. They were so fast to attribute every single death over the last year on COVID. People literally dying from cancer they would say they died from COVID. Like every hospital was so quick to attribute every single death they could to COVID. But now that the vaccine's out and people are dying from who knows what after they get the vaccine, I'm not saying
because they do fundamentally different things there, though. Because what I'd argue right there is they do fundamentally different things, right? Because the vaccine is not, you're not getting the virus. That's not that's not what a vaccine process is, right? You're getting pieces of the virus. So, for example, what happens right now is this latest technology is mRNA technology, and what it's basically doing, and again, this is like, some of this is above me, but what it's basically doing is it doesn't even impact your DNA, for example. You have like receptors, and it's basically going to your receptors and it's kind of giving it information, right? It's kind of giving like the code, like the human code with how to kind of combat this virus, right? But it's not actually giving you the virus in any sense. What the issue is, now there might be some people who, for whatever reason, their system can't handle the immuno like reactions, some type of thing like that. But there's other things at play. It's not the actual vaccine itself. And to your point about like them in the last year trying to attribute everything to COVID, it's not so much that. It's just the reality that, so remember we're talking about risk factors with COVID, right? Me and you, if we get COVID, we don't have any accompanying risk factors because we're young and healthy. But some people do have accompanying risk factors, right? Like maybe they're obese and they have some lung issues, right? Maybe they are older and have cancer, right? So like to this point, there's these things called comorbidities, right? That of course you have to document them, because anytime someone dies of something, you have to look at the range of things that impact that.
This is anecdotal too, though. Like, because check this out. Everyone has
Which part's anecdotal?
The deaths from COVID, because my experience is different than yours. Like my best friend, who I trust more than anybody in the entire world, I'm sure you have a friend that you trust who, if they told you something, you wouldn't think they were lying, right?
I don't trust anybody like that.
Well, this dude's been my best friend for like.
I feel you though, but like there's some people whose word you take to almost to the bank.
Yeah. So he calls me one day during all this COVID stuff a few weeks after it started, maybe like 2 months after it started. And he's like, dude, I just left the hospital, me and my wife and my 2 kids. And they were going to test us for COVID, but there's so many people there. Everybody's freaking out wanting to get tested. So they just sent us home. They didn't even go in the hospital, really. They were in the waiting room of the emergency room right by the front door where the doors open. Like they could still feel the fresh air from outside hitting their body. They left. Well, about 2 weeks later, they get letters in the mail that all 4 of them tested positive for COVID. And that's just one story I've heard about this.
Hold on. I think I might have missed what you said there. Repeat that one for me.
They went to the hospital. My buddy, my best friend, his wife, and his 2 kids. They never got tested for COVID, but they tested positive for COVID. They still have the paper that all 4 of them tested positive for COVID-19.
I mean, I can't speak on that. What I can speak on is that all this data, and it's anecdotal. Anecdotal just means that you have your experience, I have my experience, but that's why population level data is so important, because every locale is gathering data, right? And they give it to the state, who then gives it to the feds, right? And they're all accumulating this stuff. And so that's why all of our individual stories can be weird, right? Or like they could be the norm. There's this range of outcomes, and everyone experiences something different or something kind of more like the norm. But that's why you take the totality of experiences and you look at the statistical outcomes at the population level, because that gives you something objective, right? Some kind of average, some kind of base with which to look at, right? There's a difference between, because we can swap anecdotal experience. That's important, right? That's how you get understanding, right?
If your girl cheats on you once a year, are you going to be with her?
I hope not.
That's how it feels for me. Like, I've seen so many other situations, and I don't just believe, like, for example, somebody in this chat on my side just said that their friend died in a car wreck, and they had COVID. They tested positive for COVID when they died, and they marked their death from COVID. That may be true, but I'm not going to go tell somebody else that tomorrow, because I didn't experience that. So I can't tell you if it's true or not. I've seen probably 1,000 stories like that from people I know. Just people on my Facebook or people on my Instagram. Now, when you talk about actual personal experience, people that I know personally, I've heard of 3 different people that I personally know. One person died from, like I said earlier, he had cancer, and he had cancer for 6 months, and he was given like 6 months to live, and he pushed past it like 2 months. He ended up living 8 months after that. But he was 100% dying from cancer. 100%. He died. They tested him. He had COVID, and they said in the medical examiner's report that he died from COVID. Now, did COVID cause his death to to go a little bit faster. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but to just say he died from COVID, imagine how many of these deaths in America weren't really COVID. I just can't trust them. I don't trust them.
I would argue that, like, I think that's people who have a misunderstanding of how these things usually work. Typically, whenever you like die of anything from like a disease or something, there's like complications or other accompanying factors, right? Comorbidities, things that are attached to that. So that's again why you have like various like demographics and various risk factors and various groups that are more at risk for the virus, right? Because there's other things that impact the virus more so, right? Age, lung issues, any kind of heart issues.
Yeah, I don't know. Has anybody died from just COVID alone, or has everyone had another issue?
Oh yeah, I mean you've had young people die. It's like rarer, right? Like, so if you look at like you know, if someone's got hella health complications, they're way more likely to be, you know, severely impacted by COVID as opposed to someone who's got like almost no health and like you know, negative, like nothing like negative and not young, right? But nothing's perfect, right? So you're always gonna have some examples of people who are like in almost perfect health who COVID took out, but for the most part, it's usually gonna be older people and people with accompanying risk factors. So, but that's kind of why, like, the thing. So, for example, people don't understand the vaccine issue. Is like vaccines aren't even. It's not like it's not like if you get COVID, the vaccine is gonna like protect you from like dying. The vaccine prevents you from even getting COVID to begin with. Typically, it's not perfect, but that goes back to the concept of herd immunity. I think this is why the left gets so frustrated with some of the people on the right, is because the issue is we're talking about. So you got to address a lot of things. So we're talking about how in the end, like if we don't believe in something, how can we act on it? And we don't think it impacts other people. But the reality is, we got to hammer this point home. Our actions do impact others in a pandemic. We can look at contact tracing, which is how you can kind of look at where the virus may be spread, hotspots, things like that. And we know that certain places like indoor dining, personal gatherings, right, super mass spreader events, things like that, we know that there's certain behavior that contributed to this. We know as a country we didn't use proper. So there's certain things too. So like no one wants to talk about this, but it's from our world and data. They track like economic outcomes, and they track like public health responses across all the different countries. And the countries who had the best and strongest public health response experienced the lowest GDP decline. So what that means is the countries that took COVID seriously, their economies did better than other people's economies, right? So for example, what did these countries do? They had serious contact tracing, and they knew how to track the virus and see where it was going, right? They had really good levels of testing. They had proper risk communication, meaning the government and scientists and the medical community were properly communicating things down to the public, right? They had their borders secured. They had proper mask use early on by enough of the population, right? They were following social distancing. They did all these things. We as a country never did these things. We've been playing catch up from the beginning, and then people want to like and talk shit about the process. I'm not saying it's you, but people want to talk shit about the process or about Fauci, about these things. But it's like, we didn't listen to them to begin with, and now that didn't work, we want to like condemn them for it. It's like, but we never fucking listened as a society. Like, we got exposed by this virus for like on all fronts. Democrats did, Republicans did. I would argue the GOP really did, as it relates to their like medical and scientific knowledge. Like, I think, like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, there's just some things like I feel you. Like, I understand like our personal experiences are really strong, but there's times like, so for example, like I don't know shit about cars, right? And I don't know shit about cars. That's where I lose my man card. But let's say like I have some belief about that shit. And I'm like, yo, this is just what I saw. This is what I know. But someone's a mechanic, someone from NASCAR is like, bro, that's like wrong because of this, and this. But I'm like, yo, but this is what I believe. At some point, I got to kind of listen to them because they know more about that topic, right? Which is why I think conservatives at some point have to kind of concede that as much as we can talk about how the government failed us when it comes to the economic response, right, and the people got fucked in that process.
What about Switzerland?
Switzerland or Sweden? I don't know much about Switzerland.
Sweden. I think it might have been Sweden. It's one of the two. It might have been Sweden. They didn't have any lockdown at all.
Yeah, well, early on, right? But what happened about around probably September to November? What do they start to signal?
And then Florida, I don't think they ever had a mask mandate, and their numbers have always been pretty low.
Florida's not quite as bad as some hot spots, but again, some of that's going to be a little bit dependent upon like urban populations, how like dense you have, how like so New York and California kind of get fucked a little bit. Well, New York, I'm not gonna lie, Cuomo did some bullshit. We can talk about that. But for example, when you have a really dense urban population, you're a little fucked compared to a more sparsely populated area. But Sweden's actually a really good example because Sweden, we compared to the other Nordic countries there, and they did do something a little different, right? They try to achieve herd immunity through basically just following social distancing but staying open for the most part. Dude, compare them to other countries around them, and they had way higher death rates, and their economy didn't do better. Their unemployment rates are about the same, GDP decline is about the same, and they had way higher rates of death per 100,000, like way fucking higher. Like, and so
I don't think
like,
we ever should have locked down. I don't think we ever should have locked down a single day.
So the issue is, how come that? Why would you say that?
I just don't think that it did any good.
What do you think's what would you say is the point of a lockdown as you see it?
To contain the virus, but no one listened anyway. So I think they should have left it wide open, and then you would have reached herd immunity.
Question right there. So should we not do lockdowns, or do we have to get people to actually listen to like what we should do in a situation so we can get on the back end of things? Because not every country is in our situation right now, right? Some countries are open. So, yeah. Or they're opening earlier than we were, right? We can look at South Korea. We can look at New Zealand. We can look at the other Nordic countries. Like, this is like one topic. Like, we just got flat out exposed, bro. Like, when it comes to COVID, Americans we have no leg to stand on. We just got exposed. Like, I'll tell
you what the general consensus on the right is that the virus was politicized, and it definitely was to a point.
Well, what was Trump's best talking point? Economy, right?
Yeah. I'm not saying the virus was fake.
And I feel you. No, I feel it. But you can spin anything. I get what you're saying. Not calling it fake, but spinning it to further your aim, right?
Yeah.
So
they love it.
Here's the thing.
That's what I believe. That's how sick Nancy Pelosi and these fucking lunatics on the left are.
Pelosi's a dumb bitch. You won't get any pushback on me there. But here's the problem. So let's explore that a little bit. What is Trump's number one talking point? It's the economy, right? So who would have more reason to lie about this? The narcissist. I mean, I think we can all agree Trump's narcissist to some degree. So the narcissist,
I would say he's probably a malignant narcissist.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier, I think that's almost what we needed.
But hold on a second. What actually, you just said it yourself. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect in what you just said there. What type of personality? What is a malignant narcissist? What do they care about? It's a hyperfocus. And what's that hyperfocus?
He cares about himself and if taking care of the American people.
No, pause. You just said
because he's a narcissist, it doesn't mean he's incapable of caring about other people.
Though. That's exactly what it means.
He has narcissistic traits. I'm not going to deny that. Of course he does. The dude's never even took a sip of alcohol his whole life.
Has he not?
I mean, that should tell you enough right there. Like, he couldn't even sit down for one night and have a beer and enjoy himself. He's just like constantly trying to become better because he's so narcissistic. He wants to be the king of the world.
But here's the problem with that. So I think there's a little disconnect in what you said there. So you can't say someone's a malignant narcissist and then so they hyper focus on themselves and this. That's not a malignant narcissist then. So you'd either have to concede that you don't think he's the narcissist that most of us do, or you have to acknowledge that he is hyper focused on himself.
Well, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know if he is a malignant narcissist, but he has narcissistic characteristics for sure. A lot of these politicians do, but he definitely does. But
so this is the point, right? So no leader, no narcissist should ever be a leader. It's like a fundamental so leader, like you want people properly suited for their roles, right? Trump might be someone you want to send into a negotiation if it's a certain hardline negotiation. You don't want to ever back down, right? That's why he was so great on the topic of Iran, right? So Iran's a hot topic for me, and I'll always defend the administration that goes to Iran because the regime plays chicken, and you can't play chicken with a narcissist, right? So everyone has their role. Everyone has something they're suited for, right? But you can't have a narcissist literally leading other people where the whole point of a leader is to think about all of us. Because at best, we know Trump doesn't give a fuck about the left. And at worst, he doesn't give a fuck about any of us, including you, just himself.
Here's the crazy thing, though. What is it that I personally don't want to... You should know this just because you've heard me talk for 30 minutes. What is the one thing that I don't want to happen to this country? If you were going to guess. Communism, socialism.
I'd say socialism.
Losing our freedom.
I'd say socialism. Yeah.
Yeah. Because of what I believe in my values and my principles. So whether Trump's a narcissist or not, he was the one thing standing in the way of that. He's the one thing. It's Trump versus them.
But that's the whole point right there. I think that's the problem. And that's the problem I'm going to have. I'll just tell it because I got some of my followers in here. The biggest problem I'm going to fundamentally have is getting conservatives to understand what socialism actually is and understand we're already a mixed economy of sorts. And that while there are some people who obviously have views on communism and things like that, there's people in America who have views on fascism. You know what I'm saying? Everyone has some type of view. The reality is conservatives want small government, right? They want these certain things, but they don't want to do the things that would allow us to have these things, right? So, like what is government, for example? Like, how would you define government?
I know where you're going with this. So, you're right. A lot of conservatives are like that, but I'm not. Like, I think that you should be able to do whatever you want. For example, trans people, homosexuality, all of that, right? If you want to have a sex change, have a sex change. That should be legal in every state. Like, gay marriage should be legal in every state. Like, I'm not against. I'm more of a libertarian, I guess you could say, a little bit. But where you're right about that is a lot of conservatives. They want to say, I want everyone to have the right to do what they want. But no, you're trans. Nope, you can't get your dick cut off. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of conservatives will say, I want absolute freedom, 1776. But then when it's something that goes against what they believe, they're like, no. But the left's the same way.
In what way?
In the way that they impose their beliefs on us. And that's what I was getting ready to say, like with the gender thing, pronouns, the trans community, stuff like that. You can get a sex change if you want to. You can change your name if you want to. But if you're a fucking dude, I'm going to call you sir. And I have the right to do that. Just like you have the right to change your name. I wish everybody would leave everybody alone.
But that's kind of what they're asking for right there. Boom. You just see you don't actually disagree with the pronoun thing then, right?
Because no, I don't. I disagree with the fact that you're forcing it upon me.
But I don't think anyone's. But here's the thing: no one's forcing it upon you, right? Because the reality is, if you're going to address, hear me out. Because if you're going to address someone, do we walk around just making up names for people, or do we address them as they prefer to be addressed?
No, I see what you're saying.
Right. So the pronoun thing, like, you don't have to use a pronoun. Like, you don't have to ever address that topic, because the reality is, I don't have to ever address it. We're both big bearded dudes. People know, like, we walk around, people know who we are. But the reality is, not everyone walks life the same. Not everyone fits in society the same. Not everyone wants to portray themselves the same. Everyone's fucking different for whatever reason, right?
Right. And
so the reality is, the pronoun thing, it's like blows my mind, because this doesn't impact anybody. It's like, if someone wants to be recognized a certain way, if they want to be spoken to a certain way, if they want to be addressed a certain way, right? We do that anyways, you know. So to me it's like kind of it's something that's meant to manufacture outrage. That's really not a non-issue in my opinion. But it is an issue for. But here's why. But it's an issue for the trans community, because it's affirming, right? We know identity is central to human beings, right? So like, it's like being true to yourself and being comfortable with yourself and feeling you can actually, like, you know, live within society without feeling marginalized or ostracized, right? Like, not feeling like people are like judging you negatively, right? That's
how
important.
Many of these people, though? How many of these people who, let's say, a 50-year-old man who decided last year that he was a woman, how many of those people are real trans people who actually believe that they're a woman, and how many are just midlife crises? When you start to,
I don't know, but does it matter?
Your beliefs on me, what I meant by that, I don't know,
but does that matter though? Like,
no, not unless you push it on me. Not unless you are forcing your lifestyle onto me or my children. So what I mean by that is, if you want to call yourself, let's say you wanted to change your name to Sarah, right? That's fine. Now, if you are in a checkout line and you are clearly a man, and I call you Michael.
Has this ever happened to you?
No, but I'm just trying to make a point of how, when things happen in culture, it's on a broad spectrum, right? Like 20 years ago, homosexuality wasn't accepted, but it is now.
To some degree. Let me pause that. Is it accepted? In some ways.
A lot more.
But you still have adoption agencies that can say no to homosexual parents based upon faith, right? That's not acceptance.
Okay. And that's what I'm trying to say, as far as, like, when I say don't force it onto me or my children. What I mean is, like, for example, this drag queen story time shit and stuff like that. Like, you're indoctrinating our children with this stuff that they shouldn't be exposed to. And it's even happening.
That's where I push back a little bit. So I'll agree. Like, that stuff's not appealing to me. I don't watch that stuff. Like, I'd rather watch, like, football or read philosophy, or, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, go out and run. Like, that's not like my interest. But I gotta go to charger.
I gotta go to charger.
You're good.
Go ahead.
But the reality is, there's a whole bunch of shit out in the world that sometimes it might be harmful. Sometimes we might not like it. whatever, yada yada, right? That's where it's like kind of on us to, like, as parents, you have to frame things for your children, right? So it's like at some point, I mean, you can't just cancel or like negate or block out like everything that we don't like fit in with in terms of like culture or ideology or belief or faith or etc. Right? So it's like I think at that point in time, just maybe go to the next channel. You know what I'm saying?
There's nothing right there. What did you say just now?
So I'd say like so basically we're talking about like the drag queen thing, right?
Yeah.
So the issue with that is I think you yourself acknowledge that the hypothetical you're giving has never happened in your experience, right? But the community we're talking about, they do experience these things. We know that this community experiences ostracization. They experience violence at a higher rate. They experience higher rates of suicide, things like that. So in this conversation, in this debate, you're talking about a what if, right? That might happen in your personal life that you might have to address.
Yeah, that's just one small example. And you haven't even brought up another point though, or there's a whole other issue with this. So a lot of people on the right, they believe in Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me make sure this phone's charging.
Switching aside myself, anyways. Mosquitoes eat me up.
I think it's working. Since for the people that believe in Christianity, and actually there's different forms of Christianity. We're not going to get into all that, obviously. There's so many different denominations and stuff like that preach different things. But what we talked about earlier, when I said that this is a proven fact, the U.S. Census Bureau has studies and they have statistics on two-parent homes, right? Having a father in the home. So if you have a child who's being raised by two women, I don't agree with that. Not only because of my religion, but because I don't think that it's beneficial for the child. Now, I would not go as far as to say you can't have a child. Like I wouldn't say no.
But you just did.
I don't want you to have one.
You just did. Here's why. You have to. This is what people do. There's always a separation between belief and action. All right. And this is going to sound like a dickish comparison, but I always go back to this one because it's really important to understand. When we look, you just and to be fair, you just said that you don't think that two women would be as successful at raising a child as a traditional two-parent home.
I don't believe that because there's studies that show that it's not true, and because of my religion. And the reason why I say because of my religion, it's people fail to understand about Christians. We don't believe these things because a book told us to, right? Like the reason why I believe that a man and a woman should raise a child together is because I believe that's what God intended. And there's a reason for that. There's a rhyme and reason for everything that God intended. And I believe that there are things a man can teach a child that a woman can't, and vice versa. Now, I do not believe that no gay couple should be able to adopt a child. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I would vote against it if it was on a ballot or anything like that. I'm just saying that I think some of these beliefs that were instilled in a lot of us on the right when we were young, and because of our belief system and stuff like that, that's why we think the way we do now. I just try to separate things like this. If I'm not impeding your rights and you're not impeding mine, it should be legal. When it comes to the law. If I'm not impeding your rights and you're not impeding mine, then it should be legal. Like seatbelts, for example, I think seatbelts are the biggest misjustice in this country. One of them, like as far as just laws. It's ridiculous. You have to have
so here's the thing, like this is where that comment, I promise you just got eye rolls from people. And not because it's wrong. Like I hate seatbelt laws. I don't wear my seatbelt. I think it's fucking stupid. But imagine when there's people in this country right now having a conversation about disproportionately facing longer sentences within the criminal justice system, having their communities being targeted more by officers intentionally. We know DOJ reports have spoken about this, right? Like we could talk about, we're talking about how there's certain, like you're talking about this, your belief, right?
I know what you're going to say. I meant when it comes to laws, just basic.
I feel you, but
legal
but
and
like
what's
the
not.
reality is, like the problem is, my man, like the difference is, like I'm willing to believe that you have this belief, right? And maybe like this is how you view things and see things. But the problem is, at some level, these beliefs, you're talking about culture. What do you want to do to stop it? At some point, it becomes legislation. It becomes making laws that you think impact or mitigate this behavior. So here's an important thing to look at. And I'm not comparing you to like Nazi Germany. I think this is just a metaphor. Let's just look at it. And I think there's some things we can draw from it because it applies to all humans. In Nazi Germany, most Germans, and I mean most, were absolutely okay with the idea of stripping Jews of their rights. But they didn't want to do it violently. Most Germans didn't agree with the idea of doing it violently. That's a contradiction. Is there any way you can peacefully strip someone of their rights?
No, and I don't agree with that.
But here's the problem. When we have beliefs that, for whatever reason, be it our political ideology, our religious ideology, like our spiritual views that aren't like maybe a specific religion, that lead us to think that other people aren't as good at something as important as raising children, that's going to lead to some important beliefs and important legislation, important things on the back end. Because what's more important than how we raise our kids, right? The next generation.
Well, but I'm not going to change see, a lot of people would hear what you're saying right now and would change their mind a little bit about what I just said a minute ago, but I'm not going to do that because why
would they change their mind?
You can have a fact. You can have an objective fact that does not reflect another fact. So like I can believe that a man and woman can be better are better suited to raise a child, but that does not mean that I don't believe that two women should be able to raise a child. That is not what I mean. But I think so much right now in this country, people jump to conclusions. I'm not saying you do, but I guarantee you people in the comments have jumped to conclusions on both sides of our comment section of things we've said. They hear one thing. He thinks a man and woman would be better at raising a child, so he's against homosexuality. No, that is not what I'm saying.
Here's the issue. Here's the issue. I hear what you're saying, but here's the issue. Are belief and knowledge the same thing?
No.
So if someone brings knowledge to the table, facts, data, evidence, right, is that the same as a belief? No, we would agree with that, right? So
there are studies that show that. That's why I mentioned that in the beginning.
Well, that's exactly, which is why I'm about to set this up. So would you say that Cornell is a respected university, a respected institute? Cornell University.
Now you're making me want to get my other phone, so I
can't. So Cornell University did a little bit of research of this, and they did pretty much they gathered as much data and information as they could, and there were 79 studies that looked at outcomes for children based upon straight sex homes and homosexual homes, things like that. And out of those 79 studies, 75 studies found no like real difference in outcome whatsoever. Actually, they found that's not a thing based upon what you're saying. So if the data I have available is here, what you're saying is not true. Now, I'd be open to looking at what you had to say. Maybe they got something wrong in their methodology. But what I'm saying here is, because this is how it works, right? Our beliefs, we have to kind of ask, like, if that makes sense, right? We kind of explore the logic of it, and then we apply it.
I do that,
So I can see the logic of it, right? Okay, so maybe because of, like, biology and procreation, maybe, like, children are meant to be in a, like, man-woman setting. Okay, that not the worst logic, but then we have to apply it. And when we apply it, it looks like that's not really the case, though. So reasonable belief, but
here is really... one thing. I've never actually read a study of someone who studied children being raised by gay parents versus a straight parent and another straight parent. But I do know this, and if I need to go get my other phone, you can look it up on your computer because this is a cold hard 100% fact. So you can Google it right now, and you'll probably find 100 studies that prove this. It's what I said earlier. This is the one thing that I do believe 100%, that a child having a father/father figure. I don't mean an uncle that lives down the street and he sees once a month. I'm saying a constant father figure, a man in their life constantly every day, is a billion times more capable to be successful. I wouldn't say a billion, I exaggerated, but that's a fact.
There's some truth to that, but here's the issue. I think the issue is you misinterpret that fact. I think you think that as it has to be. So here's the thing. There's nothing in life that's like the 100% has to be this way. There's so many different ways that we can reach an outcome, right? Because the beauty.
Everybody that's alive right now has a dad, right?
Everyone, yeah, at some point in time.
Everyone alive right now has a father, a biological father somewhere.
I have but real quick, has every society ever been structured as like everyone was monogamous? Has that been every society in the history of mankind?
No.
No. So have some of these societies that weren't monogamous like that, they did well though, right?
Yeah.
But why was that? Because to that point, they had responsible role models and guardians, right? It doesn't matter if it's your two parents, whether they're a mom and a dad, whether it's a woman and a woman, a man and a man, right? All that matters is that you live in a healthy environment, right? The system you live in, how you guys operate, the kids have good role models across the board, right? Good identities across the board.
This person in here, one of my followers just said, she said, where is it? It just proves my point I made a minute ago. She said, so you're saying that a single mom can't raise a child? You can't say anything. You can't say anything in this world anymore because people just jump to, they just say, oh shit.
It's like, here's your response to that, dude. Here's how you respond to that. It's like, well, ideally, I don't think anyone would think that it's ideal to raise a child, with a single parent household. Doesn't mean that parent can't do it. Because again, that's what people have a hard time. They get butthurt because she's probably a single mom who's probably a great mom, right? Who's doing great a job. And she doesn't realize when we're talking things at a population level, the shoe doesn't always fit at the individual level because, again, the population level is the accumulation of all the various individual outcomes, right? So I think it's important, again, so like I said, like I understand your belief. I would argue that your belief.
This person just said, I would shut this dude down in a debate, referring to you. And he put it in all caps. Who designed marriage? God. We can't redesign it. ? I just want to say, you have to you have to believe. You have to have a belief in God to believe that. And if I don't know if you're a Christian.
That's the point.
Yeah, I assume you're not. I assume everyone's not when I talk to them about politics. I assume they're not because if I prove my point with religion, my point is invalid because you don't have that religion.
So here's the thing. So this is fair. If you are one of those people who can truly separate like your personal beliefs, right? Like this is what I personally believe, but I understand that like you don't believe that. Therefore, so if you're truly about everyone's liberty, regardless of belief, fair. But the problem is not everyone's like you. You know what I'm saying? No. The problem is a lot of people have that belief, and they think, okay, well then, for example, 2 men shouldn't have a kid, right? Or 2 women shouldn't have a kid. That's the problem. Not everyone thinks the way you think. So what do we do about that?
Well, it's like whenever there's a lot of people on the right who wanted to shut down mosques and stuff like that a while back, and I never jumped on that train because we can't shut down one religion and then bitch and complain because our religion's being messed with. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's hypocritical.
100%. That's fair. I can respect that, but I still want to hammer home like 2 points. Like I respect I respect your tone. I thank you for having the conversation. But the thing I'm going to always push back on is the mask claim. Masks are definitely, there's, like I said, 172 observational studies. This is back in summertime that confirmed their use is either at worst, very minimal, like impact, or at best, a really good impact. And then we have data that's come in since then, almost a year since, right? So we know masks are effective. That's why we keep having new suggestions and things on how to do this. When it comes to vaccines have been around for 300 years.
We never even talked about the best part.
What's up?
We never talked about the last topic we were supposed to talk about.
We have vaccines, we have masks, and what was the third one?
I think systemic racism or police shootings. You said something about racism. You said something about racism. I thought you were talking about the African Americans being killed by police. Is that not what you're talking about?
Can't remember, but I mean, we kind of hammered that out. I got to eat some food soon because I haven't eaten yet today. Yeah. But
I gotta go to bed.
But I did want to wrap up just a few last things I just want to get off. Like, I'm always like open to like debates on like belief and stuff like that. But what I would say is just again, masks. Kind of get my clear stance there. Vaccines have been around for centuries. The technology gets better and better, and it's actually like one of the biggest drivers behind like lowering of infant mortality rates. Human lifespans extending, things like that, the eradication of a lot of diseases and things like that. The mRNA technology itself has been utilized in some variety, like they've been like kind of doing the research for like about a decade, maybe a little longer. It just hasn't been used on this scale. And the reason why I was able to get fast tracked with such speed is imagine all of our government and private resources, not all, but the majority of them are going towards one end. Whereas usually like everyone's doing their own little thing. You have like different red tape and shit like that you got to go through. And they kind of fast tracked all the logistics of it, right? All like that bureaucratic bullshit. Because that's often what takes a lot of the time too. And the technology is already there to some extent. and they just kind of fast tracked it all, and they put all their kind of time and energy towards it. And the reality is, you have tens of millions of people who have now gotten the vaccine, and no one's died. Any of the severe reactions have happened in controlled environments where they get quick treatment. You have had a few cases of, like, in the nursing home, things like that, where there were some outbreaks of deaths in the aftermath of vaccine use, but they followed up on that. It wasn't related to the vaccine. So that's probably where I'd leave that. Because here's the thing, again, mask use, social distancing, and vaccines are the fastest things to getting back towards a healthy economy for everybody. Like, everybody should want that shit. Everyone should want a good economy. So just do the basic shit to get us back there.
If I was you,
last dance to you.
Research, just check out and see how many people have actually had issues with this vaccine, because I think you'd be surprised.
You're talking like in the hundreds, maybe.
I think more. I think that it doesn't fit their narrative, so they don't talk about it.
But, like, it does. So, for example, Johnson & Johnson, would that fit their narrative that there's a blood clot issue?
To cover up another issue in their narrative, it would.
But see, that's circular reasoning. That's where I'm always gonna have to, like, kind of call someone out, because it's like, see, now you're just doubling down on your own belief, because, like, well, you say that they would highlight issues, but now they highlighted issues. So it's like, that's someone trying to find any reason to find out, because that's actually the process right there, saying, hey, we might have a problem, let's follow up on that, right?
I think it's in the person, the pro vaccine person. I think the burden of proof is in their hands. I don't think I should have to prove why I don't want to get it. You see what I mean?
But like, the burden of proof is there. But so have you looked at the data?
Yeah, there's no trial and error yet.
There's tons. There's, like, literally, so, like, all this is publicly available, right?
It was rushed way too fast. That's my biggest issue with it, is they rushed it as fast as they possibly could. I think the problem is, I read like 2,900 issues on. I think there was like 2,900.
But here's why that logic doesn't work. Because it's not like that individual belief doesn't work. That individual belief coupled with you not wanting to get vaccines in general doesn't work. Because vaccines in general have been utilized for centuries, and that technology is very clear, right? So if you don't feel like you're comfortable with mRNA, that's fine, maybe, right? Because that is some new technology, and we can explore that. But vaccines in general, you guys seem to have a kind of problem with, right? So is it about the rush technology, or is it about vaccines in general?
It is about. So you're talking about conservatives as a whole?
I'm just talking about your view personally on vaccines.
As a whole, when you look at the situation collectively, you have a virus that is not that deadly, that I think has been politicized, has been dramatized, and over-exaggerated to huge levels. Then you have a vaccine that was rushed, and you have not enough trial and error for the said vaccine. I think this vaccine was rushed and politicized as well. By the left.
Who set this? So let's address two things there. So let's start with the politicization of COVID. Who politicized COVID, in your opinion?
Everybody to a point, but who had more to gain from politicizing it? The left, 100%.
So did the left? So the left would be like the DNC, pretty much, right? Like, at the heart of that.
COVID was the one negative thing that happened to Donald Trump's. I think if it wasn't for COVID, he would be the president right now. I think that's a whole other topic.
100%.
That's a whole other topic, though.
If COVID doesn't happen, or if he just handles COVID with any level of appropriateness, he wins the re-election. Easy.
Yeah, I don't think that whether or not he did or didn't, they painted it in the light that he didn't. So yeah, you're right. But
so do you know what, like, the rally around the flag effect is?
No.
So what that is, whenever there's like a public crisis, or like a crisis that impacts society, if leadership does a good job of responding to it, it actually really boosts their approval rating, right? So in the aftermath of 9/11, for example, because Bush did a good job of responding to the public, and the immediate aftermath of that, he experienced 90% approval rating from Democrats and independents. So if we look at other countries today, there's a lot of countries who handle this virus really well, and their leaders actually enjoyed really high approval rating from other parties, including opposition parties within their government.
See, this is where we're going to disagree, though, right here. I can already tell.
What part? Go ahead. Is there something you disagree with yet?
Yeah.
What?
I can already tell you believe that he didn't handle it right, and I believe he did. I believe that it would not have mattered what he did. That's what I was kind of saying earlier.
But hold on one second. So we can explore that, right? We can explore the application of it. But do you agree with, like, the logic of what I said there, that in general, countries who handled this well, they enjoyed good public support from all people, And that,
yeah, but
and do you agree
that's
the
what I'm
concept of
saying.
rally?
I don't think he could have came down from a red carpet out of heaven and had the cure for COVID-19 in his hand, and they still would have painted him as a monster.
Here's the problem. There's some things at play here. We got to connect all these things. So we agree then with the rally around the flag effect. We agree with that type of thing being there. We agree that there is a way to handle this. And we know earlier that I said that countries that handled the public health side of things robustly and strongly early on, they had less economic decline. And we know that Trump's best topic was economy. So had Trump handled this the way I think he was supposed to, the economy would not have declined as much. And had he done that, well,
I believe the opposite.
But here's because you think that no matter what he did, they were going to find reasons to take him down.
No matter what.
I think that had he done what he was supposed to, certain independents and certain conservatives who left would not have. He lost.
I think that he saved lives. In my opinion, he saved lives whenever he shut down travel. When he shut down travel from China,
my dude, there's no way. There's no way Trump did not save lives. That is 100% false.
Okay, but let me ask you this: when he shut down travel,
100% false.
When he shut down travel to China,
100% false.
Let me ask you
the problem. Go ahead.
Let me ask you one question. Do you remember when they called him xenophobic because he shut down travel to China, to and from?
In some capacity, yeah, 100%. Yeah, in some capacity. I would argue that some of that got a little bit conflated, but yeah.
I believe it was Pelosi, but she called him xenophobic on Twitter, and that's what I'm getting at. Is like that was the right choice, right? Regardless of anything else that he did that you don't agree with, was that the right choice?
Yeah, that individually, 100%.
Yeah, but it didn't matter what he did. She saw it as an opportunity. Oh, he shut down travel to China. That's xenophobic, and I'm going to tell everybody he's racist and xenophobic now. And that's just the way I see the left. I think they're a joke.
But here's the problem with all this, my dude. All right, so we know, this is not like a matter of belief. We can look at this point, we have outcomes. We know what you have to do to properly combat and mitigate the virus so as to not severely impact your economy. Everyone's economy is going to get fucked because of the nature of a global economy, right? There's no escaping it. But we know all the things you have to do early on. And here's the thing. One of those things is mask use. Trump himself didn't wear a mask, okay? And if you're not doing all the things required, it's not just doing one thing. It's still you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in combination together at the right time. And if you don't do all of these things, you're fucked because you're playing a game of exponential growth. Exponential growth means numbers, pretty much these small numbers get bigger a lot motherfucking faster. They're growing at almost
You know what's crazy though is you can turn on like Fox News and they'll have an expert on there that contradicts everything you're saying. And then you turn on CNN and they'll have an expert on there that is repeating everything you're saying. And then vice versa all day long. They find these experts, and maybe that's a big problem in our country is what we talked about earlier. This confirmation bias is you have these different people with different opinions and it sends confusion. And so even Dr. Fauci contradicted himself 20 times back and forth. Masks are good. So? They don't work. They work. They don't work.
Here's where I do get a little frustrated because we addressed this earlier on. Now, I'll concede maybe to understand what I'm saying, but we actually addressed the whole mask use issue early on. And so 2 things. We'll dive into the Fauci and masks. But first, CNN and Fox News both fucking suck. Those are both spin machines. All right? Those are spin machines that represent the GOP and the DNC. There are MSNBC in there also. Now, you can grab like nuggets of truth from them, but these are straight up. There's like, I'm actually a mass media major. Like
that's where me and you agree on 100%. His name is Keep the Media, guys.
Like media is some bullshit, but here's the issue with that. And this goes back to risk communication, right? So I talked about how properly conveying this shit to the public's important, right? But if people are going to CNN and Fox News for their information, they don't know what the fuck this is going on then because neither of these sides are representing this shit accurately for people, right?
That's where everybody goes.
Exactly. So there's a lot of issues with people on the left and the right when it comes to where they draw their information from. But the problem is we can look beyond that, right? Like in the end, like people want to blame media, for example, but we individually choose the media we use, right? You and I, we can pick, we want to watch on our phone, we want to check on our computer, right? I don't have to go.
And what I would tell everybody that's watching to do is you look at a story, because this shit pisses me off. Like that shit with that, I don't mean to switch subjects, but that shit we talked about on Instagram yesterday. The black guy walking in the neighborhood and the white sergeant. I'm not going to take a stance on that. I'm just using it as a point. People see that 1 minute video and they assume 100 things. What you should do is you watch the video, you look it up on about 6 different news outlets, 6 different websites. You watch it on every platform you can, and then you learn as much as you can about it, and then you wait 24 hours, 48 hours, and you see what new information comes out. Then you make a judgment. You see what I mean? People are just like you said, they're watching Fox News or CNN, and they watch it for 20 minutes, they hear something, and then they regurgitate it and act like they know.
100%. But like, so like to your point, if you're actually like really doing research, and there's levels of research, like actual research, none of us are doing that for the most part, because that's like, we're talking about years of shit, peer reviewed, like accumulating data, actually doing studies, you know, actually like putting your methodology out there and shit. No one actually does real research for the most part, right? Good media draws from real research, right? So we're doing like almost like we're doing second level research. We're doing like kid research compared to the big boy research, right? So to your point, like any article you click on, you should be clicking on the sources within that, right? Their links for why they got their information from, right? And then those usually like either research themselves, right? The actual data. You should be going through that. So, and then you should be checking out the whole spectrum, left and right. Someone brought up a good point in my comments is when people don't think about it with news is they're talking about it's really more top down, corporate versus whatever. But when it comes to news, everyone has a bias. So more important than bias is how fact-based they are, right? So CNN has a left-leaning bias, Fox has a right-leaning bias, and neither one's very fact-based in their approach. I'd argue CNN's slightly better. Fox News itself is its entertainment section sucks, right? MSNBC, its entertainment sucks.
You think CNN's better?
So it's like, hear me out. So here's the thing though. It's like saying like, so imagine we're playing Madden and like we're looking for like backup quarterbacks. I'm saying better like 75 overall versus like 73 overall. Not like you know what I'm saying, not like significantly better. You know what I'm saying? So because here's the thing. So there's different levels, right? So at the top level, there's good right-leaning sources. Cato Institute, they're funded by the Koch brothers, so you have to take that into account. But they actually do some decent like breakdowns on some topics. You just have to know where it's coming from. Christianity Today, right? Like they're Christian based magazine, newspaper and all that jazz, but it offers a decent perspective. It's not like, you know what I'm saying? NPR, PBS, these are decent left-leaning things, right? Reuters, AP, these are pretty decent. Wire, they try to be objective, kind of stick to more of the facts, right? They offer some analysis. Yeah, someone just hit Wall Street Journal, pretty good conservative. Like there's like, dude, I have a list of this shit. There's really like hundreds of good sources out there. The problem is we don't use the good sources, and even the good, like even the bad sources, we're not even reading their shit. We're just going off the headlines, right? So
I think CNN's the biggest joke.
There's worse. Believe me, bro. Even Fox ain't the worst. Like so, like there's like level 1, which is like really good news. Level 2, which is where Fox and CNN land, which is like really like just spin, like corporate spin bullshit, right? Yeah. Level 3 is outright fucking propaganda disinformation, bro. There's just some straight, just like Epoch Times, for example, is way worse than Fox or CNN.
But see, that's where we disagree. Is I put CNN in that category. I think CNN outright lies.
90%
time. 90%.
But there's levels to it. But this is where I would say you should consider that this is actually like what I study for. Like this is like literally what I do. And it's like while I understand, given your perspective, CNN's going to bother you more because of their bias. I'm going to suggest that they both just kind of suck. They probably bother you more because of your bias, right? And so it's like, whereas I find Fox News more annoying than CNN, right? But I realize they both suck. You know what I'm saying? It's like just listen to Fox
obviously, News. Because you don't agree.
Because my bias, right?
Fox News is the same, yeah. If I take my bias out of the equation and I just look at it as unbiasedly as I can, it's clear to me that CNN literally has one objective, or at least had one objective for the last 4 years, and that was paint Trump as a devil in any way they can for 24 hours a day. That's it. That's all they wanted to do. That was their entire life purpose.
Here's the thing no one wants to talk about. CNN, MSNBC, Twitter, they actually love Donald Trump. He was great for their ratings. So these are all corporate media. These are all corporate media structures. All they give a fuck about is not. They don't even give a fuck about ideology, dude. They literally only want to get people's clicks. That's all they care about. Clicks, views.
I just watch Tucker Carlson. I don't watch any other news anchors.
Oh my dude, Tucker Carlson's no bueno, my dude. That's pure. So here's the problem.
I know you can say that.
But hear me out. It's not even because of his views. It's because that's pure entertainment. That's not even like news coverage. So like within Fox, there's different structures, right?
It's an opinion. It's 100% his opinion. But I agree with you.
If there's one thing you can take from this conversation, it is hit me up in my DMs and I will give you some like right-leaning sources. Like I will give you literally just right-leaning sources trust me, Tucker Carlson. Not. I used to listen to Hannity, bro. I used to listen to Tucker. Not a
I
good
don't
source,
listen to
bro.
him. I listen to Tucker sometimes. I listen to Steven Crowder, who you probably hate him too.
I don't know him well enough to really comment on him. So
He's an asshole. But I don't listen to a lot of news. I try to learn shit myself. But
well, that's the thing then. So I would say that eliminate Tucker then, right? So that counts as like that's not even news. That's entertainment.
no, it's not news. If I want to hear an opinion, that I'll listen to him, and sometimes I agree. If I agree, I'll continue to listen to that segment. But if I don't agree, I'll just turn it off.
I feel you. Sometimes you're just going for easy listening. All right.
Brandon Tatum's probably my favorite. Like earlier when I said I was influenced by black conservatives, he's a big one. I don't know if you know who Brandon Tatum is.
I don't.
But he's check out Brandon Tatum. You're probably not going to agree with the stuff he says because he's 100% against everything you stand for. But he's a black conservative. He used to be a police officer, and he influences. He has like almost 2 million followers on YouTube. The second I said his name, my comment section blew up.
Some of my comments like him. Some people in my comments don't like him. So
yeah, they don't like him. I'm sure nobody does over there. But that's who kind of influenced me the most. Him and Craig Long and Topher. I actually know Craig Long and Topher personally. Well, I never met him, but I talked to him on social media.
I just don't follow individual people so much, just because like it's kind of arrogant. But like I do my own kind of shit, right? My own stories and whatnot. So like there's like outlets I trust that like kind of generally like check out, but even them, it's like I'm still kind of like vetting, right?
Yeah.
But like it's actually not the worst approach. Like there's actually good to like I would argue like it's dependent upon finding good individuals. But sometimes it's easy to vet a good individual who you know their approach, you know their process, you know their mindset, than like some outlets. So last thing though, I do want to hit, like this is the last thing I got to hit, is the Fauci and masks, because that's a huge misconception. Remember we said science is a process, it's not a set answer. So when Fauci goes up there and says something, it's based upon what we know at that time. And if we learn new things, then the conclusion changes. We have to then say, okay, well, guess what, guys? Because we learned this, well, now we know this. So whenever we do that, people say, oh, see, he's lying. It's like, no, he's not lying. He's just admitting we learned more. And then because we learned more, well, our view changed. So imagine you're scouting a quarterback, right? And imagine, you know, he has a rocket arm. You know, he's got a good mind, right? And he can really read the offense, right? And you've got an idea for what you're going to do with him. Now imagine someone tells you, oh, he can run a 4.40 also. Imagine you didn't have that information beforehand. Yeah, you're going to design your defense way differently than if he has a 4.40, right?
And that point you're making is why I'm not getting vaccinated yet. Exactly why. 100%.
But which is why I point out you have an issue with your logic there. Because I can concede that. I still would disagree, but I can concede that if it was with the mRNA. But you said you have an issue with vaccines in general, right? Which is why I asked those
not in general. I just want to. I'm waiting until more information comes out to see how it, because I'm hearing way too much. Like I said, go research the stuff I told you about and see. Like, I don't know what's going to happen if I exit out of this, but I want to get this guy's name for you. I'll just text you on Instagram. There's a guy who has his grandpa died, and it was all over, not major news outlets, but it was on some smaller news stations. And it's a pretty big deal. His grandpa died, and they believe strictly from the COVID vaccine. Like, that's what the family believes. That's what the doctor believes. So it's kind of turned into a big deal. Maybe somebody in the comments knows who I'm talking about. He's a black guy.
The issue with all these things is, like, there's always, like, people who believe things. People believe a lot of things. The issue is, what do we know, right? And that's where I think some people have to have a little bit of humility in terms of, there's lots of things I believe that I don't put out there as knowledge. There's things that I know for a fact as knowledge, right? And I'll put it out there. So that's
I think a lot of this comes down to you're not going to change people's mind. I'm not, and you're not, because a lot of this comes down to, I don't know if you ever studied the human brain and how conservatives and liberals literally engage different parts of their brains. Have you studied any of that before?
And so you're talking like some of the work that Jonathan Haidt's done and whatnot. So Jonathan Haidt's done a lot of writing about this, but I would ask that to that point though. So no one ever. So there's millions of people, for example, who left the Republican Party. I left the Republican Party once. There's people who've left the Democratic Party. People do change their minds, right? The issue is the majority of people are holding, to your point, are holding emotional beliefs based upon kind of their personality type, and it's really hard to get someone to change a belief that's not rationally held. And to your point, that's most people. So
yeah, I think that I'm not a scientist or a doctor or anything, but there's the divide in this country from left to right and the different belief that we have on so many different issues that coincides with each other on our own side. I don't see it getting any better. I mean, we're never going to agree. Never. We just have to find a way to agree without wanting to kill each other.
But I think you just said it there. Like you just like you can admit, right? Like you like that was a little bit of humility there, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist, right? But the majority, like the vast majority of doctors and scientists agree on this topic to some degree, right? Like, so that's where I think like I would argue, at least when it comes to COVID and the science aspect, because there's two parts: the economy and the public health. I would argue the conservatives need to keep that same energy. I'm not a scientist or a doctor, and they need to listen to scientists and doctors on this topic. And on that same note, I would argue that there's a lot of Democrats who need to acknowledge that taking the public health side of things seriously is going to impact businesses and things like that, which impacts people's ability to put food on the table and shit like that, which is important. So I think, again, this country got exposed. So on both sides of things.
When it comes
But
to
I really got to get
issues,
some food.
when it comes to issues about conservatism and stuff like that, I would say we talked a lot about COVID. That's kind of down on the bottom for me as far as like, I mean, that's fine. We can talk about it all you want to, but it's not. That's not what really
It
separates.
just kind of was easy. It was just like was easy
Yeah.
kind of shit to dive into.
Next time we can talk about we talked about guns and stuff. Next time we can talk about abortion if you want to, stuff like that.
We can do abortion next time. And actually, like, we'll do this, try and stick like on a single topic going forward when we do this.
Okay.
Maybe like little shorter segments too. So, cool.
All right, bro. Well,
I mean, everyone, appreciate you stepping up. Not a lot of people do. So, like, seriously, hats off to you because, like, legit, you're the first motherfucker who was wanting to step up. So,
really,
facts.
well, I told everybody that's watching that you hate him because we're Trump supporters, but you're a good dude.
So, appreciate that, man. Like I said, I'll submit. I disagree with most of what you say. A lot of it fact based, but we gotta have these conversations. So,
no, I'm just kidding. I'm telling you hated him, bro. All right, man.
I do. You're good. Take care. All right. I'll wrap that up. So that didn't go quite like I thought it would. That wasn't as contentious as I thought it would be, but obviously it was kind of hard to get to where I wanted to with some of those conversations. So, I saw a lot of your guys' comments. I know that a lot of people think, like, why are we doing this? Like, why am I having conversations with him? Like, things like that. First of all, I think he's a chill dude. He's a nice guy. We both kind of approach things the same way in terms of how we put ourselves out there. Obviously, we have different beliefs, different views on things. But we got to have these conversations because it's not just me and him talking, right? I had people in here who were listening to some things. He had people in there who were listening to some things. So the biggest thing is we can't address any of the issues if we can't have conversations. So as much as I do dislike some of that tribe, as much as I will continue to maintain that certain people can't be talked to, he's not one of them to me. So yeah, I feel you. It's tough, right? So like, you got to talk. Like, here's the thing: like if you're talking to someone and you feel like they're not like at all like hearing you, they're not listening, they're just there to like give their view, like, or they're just being hella nasty, probably a waste of time, right? But yeah, he liked Tucker, but he wasn't like. But if he's willing to have a conversation, right? He's not like he was. So like that to me, that's fine. I found that productive, even if it wasn't like exactly how I wanted to go. I didn't find that to be like a waste of time. It wasn't what I wanted it to look like, but. Yeah, the Tucker thing we're gonna have to work on because that was kind of interesting to me, right? Because if you're gonna point out, which is fair, like that these mainstream corporate media outlets are not good, right? Well, then you can't utilize the entertainment aspect of it. That's even worse, right? So. But I am going to be heading out here in a second. I do want to get some food. The Tucker lawsuit. Carnage, you talking about the Matt Gaetz thing? Oh, with CNN? Yeah. So with CNN, so I was trying to explain to him and this is kind of how I do it, but if you ever see like a media, there's like different graphs, right, on like media outlets, and usually it kind of rates their bias, but oftentimes it also shows their fact-based approach. right? There's kind of levels to that. And generally how you can split up is like level 1, kind of like level 2. Yeah, I agree, Shy, 100%. 100,000%. But yeah, Chronicle, I think that's what, yeah, I agree, fuck Matt Gates. But appreciate that killing time. Yeah, so you got like level 1ish, right? So you're talking like maybe like something like I said before, PBS, NPR, The Atlantic, even, right? More left-leaning version of it. Reuters, the AP, right? Level 2 is a pretty broad range, and you have, this is all your corporate, hyper partisan kind of, they put some spin, there's some truth there, right? But it's clear kind of sensationalism and spin, right? But it's not outright lies, right? And that bottom level is just your info wars and just outright disinformation, epoch time, shit like that. So something like CNN, while the actual article itself can contain some good things, this headline is going to be pretty loaded, right? It's going to be kind of biased. It's not necessarily going to reflect the article itself all the time, right? So, and Fox obviously is the same thing. I'd argue that CNN's a little bit better than Fox, but it's still shit. Just there's levels to shit. So, I appreciate that, Smack. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna do this more often. I'm trying to find more people to do this with in a more structured format more often, maybe like a set time, and then put it out onto like YouTube and stuff like that. But we'll see. Yeah, they sell Outrage because Outrage sells. Well, yeah, 100%. This was super impromptu. So I actually planned on hopping on here with a buddy, like an actual friend, who I plan on working with some stuff on, just to kind of have a fun little back and forth. And then when that fell through, he offered to jump in. So I was like, fuck it, let's do it. So next time, if me and him were to do it again, it'd be more structured. So it'd be, yo, what are you going to bring to the table in terms of information? Let me check that out. I'd probably help him out a little bit because there's a few times he was referencing like research and stuff where I would assume he probably hasn't done a lot of the research. But yeah, Demetrius, essentially, that's kind of how I put it. So, alrighty, guys, appreciate everyone hopping in and sticking around. Shy, I'm gonna get some food, but if you guys are still streaming or something later, hit me up like in a little bit, and I'll jump on with you guys. So, might do this again tomorrow night with some buddies. We'll see you guys, but appreciate everyone stopping in. Y'all have a good one. And Carnage, I did see your comment, but I didn't know. Yeah, I'll check it out. Is it a new one? And is it like in reference to like some of the defamation shit going down with Fox in general, or is it that one back in the day? Later, Sharon. Appreciate you stopping in. Obvious, Rich. Oh, Revolutionary, you're here the whole time. Props to you. Guess I could just look it up, huh? All right, Carnage, I'll let you go. I'm out of here. Later, guys.